Okay.
Tim, you and I met when I was in Melbourne,
Yes.
and we hung out a bit at Warren's place. And
Yep.
why don't you go ahead and remind me, tell me a little bit about yourself, and we'll just start with that.
Okay. So when I was younger, my parents split up when I was about 10 years old, and then my mum met my stepdad, and he my mum picked up everything and moved us to like rural New South Wales, which was right on the border of the Murray River. I don't know if you knew about the Murray River. It's the line that divides Victoria, which is where you were, and
Okay.
New South Wales.
Okay.
So it was a very remote rural area near Swan Hill, and he was an abusive partner. You know, he abused my mum
The
and
stepdad?
yeah,
Oh,
my stepdad. He was a very volatile. He was a volatile tyrant. You know,
wow.
and he was like he had the mind of a teenager. You know,
Hmm.
he openly said, like, he had a baby from a different marriage, and he openly said, "Oh, you know, I don't like kids because that they take the attention away from me." You know, like, and he like boasted about that. You
Wow.
know, so yeah, he's like, I mean, anyone that met him was just like, what the hell? What's wrong with this guy? But I think my mum clung on to him for stability. You know, she didn't know what she was going to do. Like, she wasn't skilled or anything, you know, so she stayed with him because she saw it as stability, you know, and she just tried to make it work. But he was psychologically and physically abusive to me and to her. He didn't hit
Wow.
my sisters, but he hit me and he hit my mum. My mum had a black eye on the wedding day that she married him, you know, and like, it's funny because at the time I didn't actually think that much of it because I was used to waking up and hearing them scream and that. And I didn't think that much of it until recently when my sisters gave my partner my mum's jewelry because my mum's passed away. And I was like, why don't you want it? And they're like, don't you remember? That's what he bought her when he hit her, or when he bashed her on the night of the marriage. That was like the makeup present. And I was like, oh shit, I didn't know that. But yeah,
Wow.
so that's what that life was like for me there. And you know, it was, you're constantly living in fear. And
So that was 10 years old. Were you then together with them until you were 17 or 18?
no, so it's sort of, I constantly butted heads with him because I'm not somebody that sort of takes things lying down, you know, like, or, you know, I'm very argumentative, and it's amazing that I lasted as long as I did, really, when I think about it now. But I was with him at the end of like 4 years, you know, after, you know, one time my friend came over and, you know, he started hitting me when my friend was there. And, you know, I came out to my friend, and like my friend was just like paralyzed with fear, you
Yeah.
know, and I
Yeah.
was like, what's wrong? You know, and I didn't even that, and that made me sort of think, you know, oh shit, this isn't normal, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, there were things where, like, because I told my teachers at school sort of after that, and they did get like a social worker in, but it was so bad the way it happened. Like, they called my stepdad and my mum into the school, and they made me sit like in the office, and where he came, like, he had to walk past me to get to the office. And when he walked past me, right, he's like, "You're finished," you know. And I was just like, oh my God, you know, what, this has just made everything worse, you know.
Yeah.
And I probably stayed with them for like another 9 months, maybe a year. And in that time, you know, my mum kept saying like, oh, if he keeps going like this, I'm going to leave him, you know, but I don't think she ever built up the courage to ever do that. And anyway, he came to her and he said, he basically put an ultimatum to her and said, look, you know, you got to choose me or him, you know. And my mum sort of came out and sort of spoke to me about it. And I was kind of like, don't worry, Mum, just stay here. I'll go, you know. I don't want, you know, I understand the ramifications for it. And I feel like that it'd be best if even though I was only like, I was about 14 at the time, you know, I sort of was able to understand it, you know, and realize that it was sort of best for everybody. Although it wasn't really the best. The best would have been if she had left him.
Yeah.
But anyway, my mum organised for me to go and live in Melbourne with her mum, my grandma, and you know, I went and lived there, but I wasn't allowed to. One of the conditions was I wasn't allowed to speak to my mum. And, you know, I wasn't allowed to know where they lived because they even moved house. And, you know, he wouldn't let me come there or speak to my mum or anything. And so I just sort of, sometimes I was able to call mum if I called at a certain time in the morning, but it just became too awkward. And I just basically lost touch with my mum and, you know, just sort of cut them out of my life completely, you know, and really like my friends became like my family, my peers, you know, and after sort of living with my grandma for like a couple of years, it was probably about 2 years, she couldn't discipline me, you know, I wouldn't listen, you know, like I thought I knew better. You know, it's like stereotypical teenager that thinks he knows everything, you know. And, you know, my partner at the time was actually moving out into a government house, which when I was thinking about that yesterday when I was writing it down, I thought she should have never been given that government house. You know, the government just gave her a house. So because she was rebelling against her parents, who were the most middle-class, supportive parents you could ever meet.
Wow.
But, you know, this is the social workers and you know, these sort of leftist social workers, you know, they just, the kid knows best, you know. And, you know, thinking about it now, it's ridiculous. You know, she got a house to move out so she could go and smoke drugs. That's what it was for, basically, you know. And I was like, oh, cool, I want to be in that, you know. So I moved out of my grandma's house, you know, and I told myself at the time, because my grandma was planning on subdividing her property, you know, knocking her house down and then like building 2 dwellings on it, and she'd live in the back one. And I told myself at the time, oh yeah, I moved out because of that. But now that I look back on it with some honesty, you know, it was just an excuse to get out there and do what I wanted, take drugs, basically, and, you know, just, you know, live however I wanted. I sort of skipped over, you know, I fell in with a crowd, you know, that was taking drugs, you know, and that was the thing to do. You know, I remember at my school, and I went to like Beaumaris High, which is like one of the most affluent suburbs in Melbourne. You know, one of the, you know, there's politicians and people on TV that live there, and that, you know, this is where my girlfriend at the time, that's where her supportive middle class parents were from, you know.
Wow.
And I remember at school, like the teacher said, oh, how many people here have smoked pot? And like 98% of the class put their hands up. You know, this was like the normal thing to do in that age group, in that era, you know. And so, yeah, I sort of fell in with doing that. And, you know, sort of having my peers as like the people that I sought for guidance and stuff like that. You know, even though I wasn't consciously thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to get guidance from them. You know, that's really what was happening. You know, and they all came to my government house so that they could get away from their parents and do whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
You know, and so I just went along with that. You know, and you know, I was a willing participant. You know, I wasn't doing anything. You know, I thought, you know, I went along with it, you know, and it really it just spiraled, like it was just one massive downward spiral, and you know, about 5 or 6 years of like moving from government houses and dropping out of school and you know, just progressing further and further into the drug world. You know, going to raves and stuff like that, and getting into drug dealing, you know, not working, just living off the, you know, the funds that you make from selling drugs. And, you know, I ended up, I got onto like real harder drugs, you know, like speed and heroin, you know, and once I got onto heroin, it, you know, it wasn't long. You know, a couple of years after getting onto it, I was living on the streets, begging for money and doing crime to pay for that habit. And it's like you said, you know, nobody lives in the moment like a heroin addict living on the streets.
That's
and
right.
That is so true. I've lived it. I can tell you that's what it's all about, you know. And one of the good things about that was I did meet my partner who I'm with now, you know, so who I've been with for almost 15 years, you know.
Wow.
And yeah, so that's one silver lining to it. Well, I shouldn't say that, because really it sort of made me who I am today, but you know, it wasn't fun. And like I ended up, from being in crime and you know, living on the streets and that, I ended up in jail when I was 27. So I ended up in jail, and in a way it was a great blessing, because it really woke me up. You know, I got into jail, and I just realized, you know, all of these people that are around me, that's not who I am, you know. That's not what I want to be. Like my partner says, you know, I remember when I met you back then, you were trying to be like all these other, you know, criminals, and, you know, you romanticize the criminal lifestyle, you know, and live by this criminal code, and it's all romantic. And I mean, I don't know if you know about Ned Kelly. He's a Australian bushranger outlaw that you know, is popularized in Australia. It's like an Australian folklore hero, you know. And yeah, so that sort of ties in, I guess, with, you know, how I was living at the time. You know, it's this romantic criminal lifestyle. I also had you know, an uncle that lived with my grandma, who was kind of like a shamanic dude. Like he's like a vegan, and he's a really intelligent guy, but he's very extremist in like, you know, his views, and his identity is totally tied up in rejecting Christianity. You know, and I didn't say, my grandma was a Catholic, you know, so I did have that Catholic sort of influence from my grandma from a young age, you know, going to church with her and stuff like that. But that influence of my uncle, who was kind of like a father figure for me during that time when I was at my grandma's, and you know, when I sort of moved to Melbourne, he in a lot of ways was really good, but the way he romanticized taking drugs, you know, and he said to me, like, you know, if you need to take hallucinogens to open your mind, you know, to the world, you know. And, you know, a lot of that sort of stuff might be true, but now that I look back on it, and I'm about to have my own child, that's such an irresponsible message to tell to somebody, you know, who clearly couldn't control their addictions, you know, and, you know, had the wrong personality. You know, I look back at it now, and his rejection of Christianity, and, you know, he filled my head with all this stuff about his ideas of Christianity, right? And how it was basically just a system designed to restrict people from enjoying themselves, you know. And really, and I find this with a lot of baby boomers of that generation, and the, you know, the hippies and the you know, the sexual revolution and all that, you know, their rejection of Christianity seems to just be based on them feeling constricted by it and wanting to do whatever they want, you know, and they sort of see it as part of, you know, it was part of that overbearing, dominant, conservative culture of the time. You know, they can't separate Christianity from that culture. But so that was sort of the influence that I was having. And I reckon now that I look back, that sort of really pushed me along that path, you know, of drug taking. You know, I got into like the beat writers. I don't know if you know, like William S. Burroughs, Jack Kerouac.
Oh yeah. The beat
Yeah,
poets.
yeah. And like Hunter S. Thompson, you know, because to me, they validated my existence. I was like, you know, as a kid, I was like, well, as a young man, I was like, you know, they can take drugs and look, they've lived a successful life, you know, and that's what I told myself. And really, you know, obviously their circumstances were totally different. You know, they won the lottery sort of thing. You know, that's not what happens to most people that take drugs. But
very true.
Yeah. But that's what I was holding on to, was that romantic side of it, you know, and it was all bullshit, you know. And so anyway, I ended up in jail, and I realized, you know, this isn't me. You know, I've got to make some changes, you know. And I slowly started to, they weren't massive changes, you know, but I started to like look for work, and you know, I'd actually split up with my partner at that time, the partner that I'm with now, and you know, I started looking for work, trying to work, and trying to keep a roof over my head, which was pretty difficult. Trying to keep a roof over your head, you know. I was after having government housing when I was younger, when I got kicked out, when I got released from jail, you know, I didn't have any housing. It was just rooming houses and stuff, you know. And when you're going through that and you got no support, nobody, it's really difficult, you know, and you got no guidance, you know, and you just got to sort of make up whatever you do from whatever you can think, which is severely distorted because you're taking drugs. You know, it's pretty difficult. And I actually waited on the housing list for like 15 years, you know.
Wow.
So when you're a child, they'll give you a house, like you'll be at the top of the list. But, you know, as an adult male, being behind like pregnant women and women with children and that, you're like on the bottom of the list. Yeah. And so, yeah, like I slowly, I got out of jail when I was 27. I started making little changes, but not really big ones. I still took drugs, you know, but I just sort of tried to regulate it, you know, like, oh, I'll be a responsible drug taker, you know. But really, it's just like, you know, I was just trying to fool myself, you know, that this was, you know, you could live like this. Because I couldn't really, you know. I would, you know, I ended up just like couch surfing basically, and I ended up getting back with my partner, and she'd sort of had a like, she'd sort of found Christ, and although she wasn't she wasn't as adamant about it as she is now. And so she was like a stabling sort of influence on me. And this was when I was about, I think I was about like 31 or 32. And, you know, I started to get a job and like work full time and actually sort of take on the role of, you know, trying to have like a family. And
Did she
you
have
know,
any children?
no, she
Okay.
didn't have
So
any
it's just the
children.
two of you.
Yeah, just the two of us. And but I just sort of felt like, you know, with her, it gave me more purpose, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went, because I was like, oh, what can I do? I'm 30 years old. I haven't got any skills. You know, ideally, I would have wanted to go to university, you know, because I actually did pretty well at school. But you know, it just wasn't really I didn't know how to go about it, you
Yeah.
know, like
Yeah.
I had no idea,
Yeah.
you know, and, you know, I had my mate, Ian, who you've had a
Yeah.
conversation with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ian was like the one good influence I've had in my life from, you know, I met him when I was about 22 or 23. You know, he came and visited me in jail.
Mm-hmm.
He's like the only person that did that.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I often, you know, attribute my turning around of my life to my partner and to Ian, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much that he like did like, you know, gave me like heaps of money or anything like that,
Right.
but just because he was there and he provided me with the, it made me see that, you know, people can live lives without being on drugs, and they're happy. You know, this is like the other delusion with, because that's the other thing is that people in that lifestyle, they don't have people that they know that live differently. You know, all the people I grew up with
Yeah.
in that lifestyle that are still in that lifestyle today, their parents did that. They were in and out of jail, you know, and so they can't see a way out, you know. And then they don't know, like, some of them don't know one person that, you know, because they grow up in these commission houses which become like ghettos,
Yeah.
you know, and they don't see a way out. And that's what Ian was for me, you know, like I could see a way out through him, you know. And, you know, I've said it to him lots, but I don't think, you know, he really gets how important it was, you know. And he was like the first person I knew that had read like Nietzsche, you know, and he was like, I always had this thirst for like this philosophy and religion and stuff, but I didn't know how to articulate it. I didn't even know what it was, you know. I just knew that when I met Ian and he spoke about this sort of stuff, that I liked talking about it with him, you know.
Yeah.
And he took me out to, I remember when when I first met him, he took me out to a conference or a talk with Bishop Spong, I think his name is. Do you know
Yeah,
him?
I know who he is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And you know that, and he took me to the Existentialist Society, and there was a few other talks we went to, you know, and that was, you know, that was my sort of first look into a whole different world, you know. And I was like, oh, maybe, you know, but although at the time I still couldn't see how that could be part of my life, you know. I just thought it was like, oh yeah, I enjoyed talking to Ian, and you know, that's good, and you know, sort of actively trying to make that part of my life and who I am didn't come till much later, you know. So back to when I met back up with my partner when I was like 31, 32, I decided that, you know, the best option really was to get into construction. You know, I'd been doing labouring work and stuff like that. And I figured, you know, that for somebody that's unskilled, you know, and can't go to university, that was probably my best option, you know. So I went to like TAFE, which is, I don't know what the equivalent is in America. TAFE schools, like it's tertiary education, you know, where it's not university, community college.
Oh, okay.
That's
Yeah.
what you call it. Yeah.
That's what it's called in the States.
Yeah. Yeah. So I went to like TAFE to do what they call like a pre-apprenticeship, which is something that'll get like sort of get you familiar with the apprenticeship that you want to do. So I wanted to do like a carpentry apprenticeship. And I went and did that, and you know, I'd lined up an apprenticeship through a guy. I'd gone and done work for him, and he was happy, and he was going to take me on. And at that stage, I was on like the methadone program, you know, because when you're on heroin, you can't just stop taking it, you know. And I thought, well, you know, now's time. I'd actually gotten like stable accommodation at that time, you know, and I thought, you know, now's a good time to get off all of the drugs, you know, and get clean. And so I thought, you know, I'll get clean and then I'll start an apprenticeship, you know, and this will be like my new life. And so I went through like the withdrawal, which, you know, was like the worst thing. Like I can't describe how bad it is. You know, people just have no idea how bad it really is. You know, it was 3 months of just absolute torture. You know, I was awake, writhing in pain, like not Peterson not sleeping, like literally not sleeping for 2 weeks. You know, I didn't sleep one wink, and I was writhing in absolute pain. And for 3 months, you know, I went through that, and you know, it was so bad. It scarred me. It scares me today to just think about it. And I got through that, and then I went and started my apprenticeship, you know, and I did that for about 2.5 months, and I started getting like a pain in my back, and I was like, you know, I told my boss, and he's like, "Oh, you're just green, you know, you're just getting used to working hard and all that." And I stopped being able to sleep as well. Like I was only getting like 2 or 3 hours sleep at night because of the pain in my back. And it was really weird. Like when I would get up and move, it hurt less. But when I laid down, it killed me.
Wow.
You know?
That's weird.
And yeah. And I was just like, oh, I've hurt my back, you know. And I told my boss, and he's like, oh, you're just green. So I was like, all right. I kept coming back to work and barely getting any work done because I was in so much pain. I couldn't pick anything up. And my boss is like, oh, you're right. You know, you go home, you're useless. You know, you're not doing anything here. So I went home, and, you know, my partner was getting like really worried, and I was just like, oh, it's all right. I've just got a sore back. I just got to take a couple of days off, you know? And, you know, at first she bought that, you know, and then after like 2 or 3 days, she's like, she cracked the shits, you know, and she's like, I'm taking you to hospital. Because we'd been to like 2 or 3 different doctors and that. And the doctors, as soon as they found out that I was like an ex-methadone patient, they thought I was doctor shopping, trying to get like stuff. And I wasn't, you know, like I went to like 3 or 4 different doctors, and they wouldn't believe me. And you know, it took my partner, you know, I'm taking you to hospital, you know. She forced me out to go to hospital. So I went to hospital, and you know, within like usually in Australia, because they're all public hospitals here, you know, you usually go into emergency and you have to wait hours, you know. But they took me straight through. You know, they assessed me and they said, "Oh no, you got to go straight through." And they started doing tests, and they realized, like, I had a pot belly at the time, and I just thought I was drinking too much beer. But they said, no, that's all fluid in your stomach, and we have to drain that fluid. So they started to drain that fluid, and they were doing tests at the time, and they put like a tube in me to drain all the fluid. So I was in hospital draining fluid, and we weren't really sure of what it was. The doctor said to me that, you know, because of my past, they said you might have liver cancer. And I was like, I didn't believe it. I was like, no, I don't think I've got liver cancer. And they went and did the tests, the blood tests and scans and all that. And they came back the next day and they said, well, you know, you've 100% got cancer.
Wow.
And I didn't believe them. I was like, no, I don't have cancer. But they were like, no, you've got stage 4 non-Hodgkin lymphoma. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't believe it, you know. And I was just sort of very nonchalant about it. But they said to me, this is the best cancer to get, you know, because non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is very treatable. You know, but they said you probably had it for about 2 years and you didn't know.
Wow.
So yeah, that happened. You know, like I got clean, and then you know, I was starting my new life, and then I got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and you know, it did get pretty bad. You know, at one point they told my partner, you know, you need to call a priest. You know, he's not going to live. You know, and they put me into ICU, which is the intensive care unit. And I was in the ICU for like 2 weeks when they started like heavy doses of chemo, like pretty much straight away. And fortunately, I responded really well to the chemo. And yeah, I mean, I was sick from the chemo, but it wasn't too bad, really. The withdrawal, I would rather have cancer than go through those methadone withdrawals. Like every single day of the week. It was, you know, the cancer was a walk in the park compared. Like seriously, it was so much easier, you know, because all I had to do was lay there and be sick. And my partner was really the one that it was, you know, put a lot of stress on, you know, because we didn't have any family support or anything. You know, she was the only one working. She actually got sacked from her job for taking too much time off because of just come and see me in hospital. You know, and so at that time, you know, the people that supported us the most was St. Vincent de Paul, you know, which is a Catholic, you know, charity, you know, run by like volunteers. You know, they gave us food, they gave us like a vacuum cleaner, you know, they helped my partner with payments on rent. You know, if it wasn't for them, we probably would have been out on the street, you know, with nothing, you know, to her name. You know, my partner was paying off her car loan, you know, and she almost lost her car loan. And, you know, so that was really where the worst part about it was the stress that it put on her. You know, she had to work, plus she had to look after me, plus, you know, she had to clean the house and all that sort of thing. So, you know, and really I see it, if she wasn't there when I had that back pain, I wouldn't have gone to hospital. You know, I would have thought, you know, just being a man, you know, like, I've just got a back pain, and I probably would have laid on the couch for another couple of weeks and died. And so she literally saved my life in that respect. And I mean, you know, so it's good that I beat the cancer, but the bad part about it was when, to deal with the pain in my back, they gave me opiates. And when I first came to hospital, I was like, I refused to touch them, because I just gone through that detox.
Yeah, because your history.
Yeah, and I said to them, like, I made a promise to myself, I said, I'm never going to touch opiates ever again, like not even like a Panadine 4, which is like a Panadol with codeine in it. And I said, I'm never going to touch opiates ever again, even if it's just an analgesic or whatever. I'm never going to touch it. And I said, unless my life depended on it, thinking that there was never a situation like that could ever happen, But, when I was in hospital and I started to refuse the opiates, the doctors were saying, I refused it for the first few days, and I wasn't sleeping because of the pain in my back. And they got to a point where they're like, Tim, you have to take it. Otherwise you're not going to sleep and your body's not going to be able to fight the cancer. Yeah. So I begrudgingly took it. And, one of the nurses told me, if you take opiates for pain, you can't get addicted. And I stupidly believed them, even though I knew in my heart that wasn't true, And, I found out now that there's probably other pain meds they probably could have given me back then. But for whatever reason, that didn't happen. And so now I'm still, when I finished the chemo, the last thing I wanted to do was go through an opiate withdrawal. The the bills and the rent were piling up. Yeah. So I made the decision that, I had to get on the program again and just get back to work as quickly as I could.
Yeah.
So, that's the worst part about having cancer in my view, was that, I'm back on the program, and I mean, it's not ideal, but I didn't have much. I didn't have much choice. And I would love to be able to get off it, but that means I'd have to take 3 months off from work and life, and life just doesn't stop when you want it to. It's going to go on, and at the moment, really, the only hope is that I can save up enough money so that I can save up enough money and enough holidays to take 3 months off, and then I can sort of deal with that problem when it comes up. But after beating the cancer and that, and things started to get better, everything sort of settled down, and I went back to work. I got into like the industry, the job that I'm in now, which is caulking. I don't know if you know, but like, in the wet areas of your house where it's all tiled, the silicone that joins the tiles. That's what I do. I put the silicone in on all the new houses that are being built out in Australia, in the area that I live in. And like the area that I live in, it's like one of the fastest growing areas in Australia now. The construction industry is just blowing up. It's amazing. I've got so much work, which is really good. But it's the perfect job to listen to Paul VanderKlay podcasts while I'm having a crappy day at work, listening to you and your listeners, and it's really good for that, because it's sort of.
How'd you find my show?
The YouTube algorithm. You know, it found you after I sort of discovered Peterson. You know, it came up with one of your videos, and it was one of your videos. I think is one of the first in that sort of after the Peterson thing.
Yeah.
And it was talking about Nietzsche, I think. Nietzsche, you had a Nietzsche book, and I was like, oh wow, this dude's, you know, because I was sort of looking into Christianity because of the Bible lectures, you know, and I was sort of just going down that rabbit hole, and then I saw you, and you were talking about Nietzsche, and I saw like there was like a marriage of those two worlds of, you know, that philosophy world that I was really intrigued by, and Christianity, you know. And before I heard Peterson and you, I'd never heard of that before. You know, I never knew anything about Augustine or, you know, I didn't know that like that history within Christianity, you know, was, you know, that it basically that philosophy and that sort of grew out of that. You know, I didn't know anything about that. And so, yeah, I saw your video and I was like, oh, this dude really looks like he knows what he's talking about, you know. And I was like, oh, I got to show Ian, my mate, you know, because he read Nietzsche. So, you know, I sort of, when I find things, I sort of run it past Ian to see, like, because I know he knows way more than I do. He's a lot smarter than me, you know, so I just run it past him and see what his view on it is, you know. And if he likes it, then I figure, well, it can't be too bad, you know.
Well, and I had a wonderful conversation with Ian. I know there's some reasons why he didn't want me to post it, so I actually took it down when I was in Australia. But I had a wonderful conversation with Ian, and it was so much fun meeting the two of you when I was down there.
Yeah, that was fantastic. That's a great privilege that I will cherish forever, especially going back to Warren's house.
Yeah.
And able to talk with you and, you know, having Warren and his wife host us, you know, I'm so gracious for that. You know, that was one of the best nights of my life, to be honest.
It was a wonderful evening. It was that whole trip for me was just, I never thought in my life I'd do anything like that, but it was just, you know, just a pastor of a small church. That's all I am.
Yeah.
And no, it was a, you know, a wonderful conference. And once we get all the videos over, we'll, you know, I'll post them on my channel.
Yeah, that'll be good. I think I've talked Ian into releasing the video, you know. He, you know, because I actually heard it, remember? Because
yeah.
Got to take it down off the podcast.
Off the podcast stream, that's right.
Yeah. And I heard it, and I'm so glad I heard it because I had to work on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And I was having the worst day, you know, and your podcast was on like auto cue.
Yeah.
And then it came on, you know, and it just brightened my whole day up. It was so good. It really got me through that terrible work day that I had. So yeah, I've been working on Ian, telling him, you know, you got to release it, man. Like, you know, you're being too worried about it. It's not. It's all good. Just release it. And he actually has agreed. He's going to do it. He was going to edit it, but I said, just leave it. It's fine, man. You know, Pastor Paul wouldn't release it if he thought, you know, anything bad was going to come of it. You know, so. And you know, trust in God, man. It'll be all right. But yeah, so I think I've convinced him to release that. And yeah, I think that'll be good. I think people will enjoy that because he's a very smart guy.
He is, and he's got a lot of experience, and he's got a very interesting story himself. And I thought he told it well.
Yeah.
You know, he shared a lot of other opinions that he's got. And I know, you know, everybody's got opinions, and not everybody agrees with everybody else's opinion. That's what it means to be human, but it's okay.
Yeah.
No, I thought it was a lovely conversation, and yeah.
Yeah.
It was good. It was good. And so you went to church this morning. So I know you and I have been trying to find a time that works for both of us. We got this crazy time difference between Australia and California. You know, it's like 7 hours. You're like 7 hours one day ahead, but 7 hours, you know, earlier. So
yeah, it's difficult with work, you know, during the week.
Yeah.
For me, and you know, obviously the weekends are probably really full for you. So, you know, I'm really grateful that you've made this time for me. It's I really appreciate it.
Well, I love your story, and I love your story because on one hand, it's unique, of course. Everybody's story is unique, but it's also so very common. You know, I grew up in Peterson, and one of the big things going on in Peterson at the time was heroin was going through the U.S. when I was growing up, and so my father worked with other people, and it was called the Addicts Rehabilitation Center. And of course I was a kid. I didn't know anything about heroin or just growing up. There's just steady stream of men, you know, through that program. And what you said during your talk here was something that I'd hear often, because these guys would get clean and then they'd get their lives together and they'd get a job and then they'd get a family, and some of them would stay, you know, in my father's church. And of course, growing up as a kid, I'd get to know these guys, and these were streetwise guys, and they were cool, and so I'd look up to them, but I remember we'd go on these Memorial Day camping trips it was a church camp out, you know, it was all I knew growing up. But I remember one of them would always say, you know, I just had no idea that, you know, you could have fun without getting high or drunk, because that was his whole life was that's the only kind of fun they knew. Fun was getting high and drunk. And here are people just enjoying camping. And this one guy, he died young, but his name was Holmes, and he was he married a woman in the church and had 3 daughters who were like little sisters to me growing up. And it was just so much fun. It was so tragic when he died, but he had gotten a second life basically. And when I listen to your story, that's what I hear. I mean, by virtue of, you know, your stepfather and I mean, you just didn't, as a kid, you just didn't have a chance. And you got sent down a bad road, and, you know, again, ironic. But it's very true that I know many people who have stories like yours. They went to prison, and then it's like, okay, what do I want to do? Because in prison, you see very clearly what one road looks like.
Yes.
And you say, okay, if I don't want to go down that road, I have to learn an entirely new way to live. And that's so hard, but you know, bit by bit by bit, you did it. And it wasn't bang, a night and day experience. It was, you know, it's every day. And then another struggle comes up and another challenge, and, you know, and there'll be more challenges for you, because there always are, because life is full of them. But, you know, I praise God that what, you know, he's done in your life, and how far you've been able to make it so far. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, it is. I was saying to a friend that I met at the conference that you did in Melbourne, I went and spoke with him, and I said, you know, I was thinking the other morning that I might be the luckiest person alive. You know, like that's how grateful I feel at the moment. I mean, I haven't told you, because I had the chemo, the doctors told me that it was impossible for me and my partner to have children. And we really wanted children, you know. It felt like, you know, life sort of just felt like it was missing something, you know. And we started doing IVF, and we started the process, and we actually stopped doing the IVF because the timing was a little bit out. It wasn't like as convenient as it could be with work and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So we stopped the process, and you know, we just started going back to church then, you know, back to the Catholic Church, and you know, we started to pray, you know, for God to bless us with children, like to actively like pray, like we always thought it, you know, but we'd never sort of gotten down on our knees and prayed and you know, and done that, and we started to do that, and you know, like the week after the second week back at work, we found out that she was pregnant.
Wow! Congratulations.
Thank you. It's and it feels so amazing. It really, sometimes I'm worried about talking about it because it feels too good to be true, you know. And I feel like, I find that people that have gone through a lot of trauma, you know, they always are worried about enjoying things because they feel like something bad is going to happen.
You know.
Even though I sort of realize now that a lot of that was due to me not taking responsibility in the past. You know, and you know, obviously now I try to do that whenever I can. You know, and things are getting better. You know, I'm starting to be able to trust myself and, like, you know, enjoy the pregnancy, you know, without sitting there stressing, oh my God, something's going to go wrong, you know. And really, I mean, it's just a real testament to, you know, God helps those who help themselves, you know. It really, now that we're going to church, we've got stable routine, you know, God seems to be rewarding us, you know, and giving us the things that we've asked for, and, you know, the things that maybe we even deserve. You know, I'm still not confident about saying that I deserve it, you know. I still feel like I don't deserve it, you know, like it's too good, you know. I'm still a bit iffy about that. You know, the first 20 weeks of the pregnancy, I was like, oh my gosh, she's going to have a miscarriage, you know. That's the first time I've actually said it out loud as well, you know, because I was too scared to even say it out loud, you know, because it's a common thing for women. And my partner, you know, we're not spring chickens. I'm 37 and she's 39, you know, so, you know, the problems that are associated with older pregnancies and stuff, you know, she's actually considered a geriatric pregnancy. Everybody over the age of 35 is considered a geriatric pregnancy. You know, and so there's a lot of extra things that they do for us that they probably wouldn't do for younger parents. But it's it's unbelievable. Like I said, I feel like the luckiest person alive.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm so happy for you, Tim. I'm so happy for you.
Thanks.
It's yours is such a good story. It's such a good story. I'm so glad you were pretty persistent, because like, oh, sign up. But he's like, I can't get that. Those don't work with my work hours. So when are we going to meet? So maybe when you're in Australia, but that got busy. And so I said, well, you know, after I meet you, then it's, you know, then there's just a little bit more incentives. Like, okay, well, let's find a time. I usually don't do it on weekends because I try to preserve that family time on weekends. Saturdays are sort of family days. You know, honeydew days, errand days. So I usually don't do any, try to not to do any work on Saturdays, but then like, okay, Sunday, Saturday, that might work.
Oh, well, I'm glad that you did, you know. It's I really appreciate it, you know. Like when I was talking to you, and you're like, oh, what time do you want to make it? I was like, oh, I feel like I'm inconveniencing you, so you set the time and I'll work around you, you know, because I realize that, you know, it's you know, you do so much, you know, and it's, you know, I was very wary of, you know, you inconveniencing yourself, you know.
No, it's good. And again, just listening to your story, just, this is why I do this. This is why I do this. This is just so good. And why I love doing this on my YouTube channel, because stories like yours, I mean, you are a lottery winner, and it is special. But the thing is, most of the time, you don't get stories from regular people on a channel where, a few thousand people can see it.
Yeah.
And just, here's a story. And because the thing is, there are a lot of people out there who are at different places. They've had, maybe not the exact same situation as you.
Yeah.
I've talked to a number of people whose videos we haven't put on, because often you can't tell a story like yours until you're in a place of enough security where you can.
Yeah.
And so, but the struggles that you had, abusive families, not that uncommon. Drugs, not uncommon. No. And the problem is that these things then pile up in a person's life.
Yeah.
And again, it's hard for people to understand that, the government programs can be wonderful. They can help. So I'm not one who says the government shouldn't do anything. No, I think the government should try. But government programs themselves won't help. I mean, you had to come to the place. You had to come to the place where you decided to do this, and you decided to look for better role models, and you decided to take hard decisions and follow them through. And then again, I see this often, and then you get all this way and you get clean, and then cancer, bang. Okay. And then, okay, you got to take these drugs, and bang, you're back on opioids. And but you haven't let it stop you, and you're still moving forward, and now you're going to have a child, and that's for you and your partner, that's going to take you to whole new levels in your life. Now, I mean, I was just sitting down with a friend of mine who just had his first child with his wife, and they'd had struggles in their marriage and all kinds of things. Again, as a pastor, I sit down and what I'm doing right now, I know for people on my channel, they're like, "Oh, you do this with your channel." For me, it's never felt odd, because I do this in real life. You sit down with someone and they tell you their story, and I wouldn't like this job if I didn't love hearing people's stories, and your story is beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
And when you have the child, then suddenly your life's going to shift again, because now it's like, okay, well, I gotta keep it working between me and my partner. Now it's going to be, both of you are going to be focused on, oh man, we gotta take care of this kid. We want this kid to have a better life than we had coming up, and we want to live right, because in many ways, the most important thing you can give your child is an example of what it means, to live. And so, but at the same time, it's all this studies say, well, the most unhappy years of a relationship are the years with a small child, because it's stress, it's tough. And so all, the sobriety, all the stuff that you've won, it'll all be tested in this. But I think, you'll also be given the strength to go forward. So I just want to encourage you and congratulate you and thank you, because it's good. It's good.
Yeah, it is good. And me and my partner aren't naive about those challenges. We are trying to prepare for it. And it's something that I wanted to ask you, what books would you suggest that aren't inconsistent with a Christian, upbringing for a child? Like, is there anything that you would suggest that, I could read for becoming a Christian parent?
Boy, that's a good question. What's so good about your question is, for people like myself, you don't realize that the first draft of Christian parenting is what I grew up with learning from my Christian parents. So
Yeah.
And so I actually don't even have a book off the top of my head, but I am sure there are a lot out there. And so because there's tons of mommy blogs and,
yeah, it's just hard because like I find that because we have read books, parenting books and stuff.
Yeah.
But I find with the corruption of the social sciences from the left, it's very hard to wade through it, and take what you need, and to find books that aren't, laced with that sort of left-wing, stuff that's anti-Christian as well. But at the same time, me and my partner, I was saying to my partner, I was thinking, my partner's like all excited about, we're having a boy, by the way. Who's,
wow. Congratulations.
And we're going to name him Judah as well.
Wow.
But, my partner's all excited about having this child, and I'm thinking about how I was when I was a child, and I'm like, I said to her, you don't know what you're in for. I feel sorry for you, that, if he takes after me, then it's going to be rough,
Wow. And you had a difficult time growing up though. So it might not be, it might, sure. You'll have some of the genetics and some of your traits, but some of your temperament probably, but I would recommend looking for Christian groups of young parents who are, then you'll get a lot of good feedback. And I'm sure in the comment section, people will weigh in and give recommendations.
Yeah. But the thing is, if it does take after me, I'm worried that he will rebel against whatever we tell him, because that's what I would have done. I thought I knew everything, and if somebody tried to enforce a worldview on me, even if it was right, I would rebel against it just to prove that I knew more, and so I've already said to my partner, I don't want to force feed Christianity to him. I think that we need to be very considerate about how we go about it, and maybe just present it, and let him, just dangle it there and let him come to it on his own.
I generally speaking, especially when they're young, so what happens naturally is usually if you just raise your child in the church, along with the church programmings, teach them Bible stories when they're young.
Yeah.
So when they get into their teenage years, there'll be some differentiation where they will, usually at late grade school, they'll be very loyal, and then they get into the teen years and they'll start to differentiate from you. They'll do their own rebelling naturally. You don't have to, but the best thing is just when they're young, just because they're just going to follow and do what you do. If you pray, they will pray. If you read the Bible, they'll read the Bible. Just teach them Bible stories. You don't have to be oppressive or tyrannical. Just have it be a natural part of education. And when they get into the teenage years and they begin to have their own ideas about things, they will naturally start to make their own choices. And in this world, which is, our cultures, which are all this, I believe in myself. You don't even know what a self is, when you're 15. You're still just acting out of your head. So I wouldn't even worry about that whole issue. Just have family devotions, teach them the Bible. And the thing is, even if they, in their teen years, decide to walk away from the church and walk away from it, all that stuff will be in there. And, and in fact, a lot of the formation that they see, and when they get old enough, they'll begin to understand parts of your story and parts of your past. And so the main thing is, the main piece of advice I would give you is be the person you want your son to become. That is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And, just, the little bit I know you in terms of being honest, in terms of being loving, in terms of the battles that you've won, I think your child is going to be okay. And, the best that you can in terms of you and your partner, have a solid relationship. I don't know if you're married yet, but I'd advise you to get married.
Yeah.
And be, because the best thing for a child is to have two parents who love each other and are committed to each other, because that helps the child feel secure. And once the child feels secure, the irony is that a child who feels secure can actually rebel and push against boundaries in all the most appropriate ways, because they feel safe enough to push against boundaries.
Yeah.
So, you can get a lot of advice, but the truth is the child will grow to become who you are in many ways. And so the best work that you can do for the child is the work that you do on yourself and your relationship with your partner.
Well, we did read Brain Rules for Baby, and it sounds a bit weird, but it was actually a good book. It's written by a Jewish psychologist, I think. And the main message that we got and that he went on about was that the better that mine and my partner's relationship is, the better the child will be, emotionally. And, so we've gone into couples counselling and stuff like that, not because of the specific problems that we have or anything, but because we want to build a solid foundation for our child, and it is really important to us that they don't experience the things that we did when we were younger. And I always, in terms of the rebellion, I always remember C.S. Lewis's thing when he said, the Holy Spirit first really entered me the day that I started to reject the church when I was a teenager. And because that was the path that ended up leading him back, so I guess and you raise a good point, really. Like the rebelling and that is so far down the track. I'll probably have my hands full with lots of other things before then.
But certainly will.
Yeah, I just had a bit of pity for my partner. Thinking about if it takes after me. It's like, in a way, I guess that's my karma or whatever coming back on me.
You never know. I have 5 kids. All of them are different, and when you have multiple kids, you very quickly realize they have different temperaments. So my youngest son and my oldest son are kind of the most alike in some ways, but they're also different in other ways because you got birth orders. So it's, you just don't, it's Forrest Gump. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And so, but it's, I'd say, keep, work with your partner on building a marriage, stick with the church, find, relationships within the church and that are helpful to you, peer groups, mothers groups or fathers groups, what have you. There's usually resources that get passed around there that'll people will find helpful and appropriate. But the main thing is, be who you want your child to become. That's the best thing you can do. And that's generally what'll, in many ways I've become my father in some ways, even when I didn't want to do that. But
that's funny you should say that, because that touches on something else I wanted to ask you. Me and my partner watched this Intelligence Squared debate recently. I don't know if you know the Intelligence. I think that's Peterson was on, wasn't it?
It was on the monk debates, but Intelligence Squared is very similar to it.
Similar, yeah. But the topic was the name was Parenting Doesn't Matter, and then in brackets, or not as much as you think it does. And it was about like they had geneticists on one side and psychologists and that on the other, like there's females versus males, and the females were arguing, well, yes, parenting is like the overarching influence in everybody's life, and the geneticists were saying no, genetics make up 80% of who you are. And I thought that ties in with the Calvinism, that predestination and all that sort of thing. And the thing that you said before about becoming your father, that's what happens with your genetics, because your genetics, they don't come out all at once. Like, you said before about when you're younger, you've got to rebel and push back against the world. And so, your genetics are being formed in that. And when you start to become like your parents, that's like your genetics sort of settling in, and you're becoming who you are, sort of thing. And you've got those same genetics as your father.
Yeah, well, he had more hair than I do, but parenting matters a lot to your kid, and it'll make his passage much easier. And I, on one hand, I've got my father's genetics, obviously, and also some half from my mother. But my parents were wonderful parents, and I often reflect on how blessed I am that they raised me in the church, that they were good examples of what it meant to be serious thinking Christians who were also committed to live out what they preached. And that kind of gift you can give to your children, there's no greater gift. My parents didn't have much money. It was a pastor of a little poor small church. But as a kid, you don't know. And we had a roof over our head, we had food on the table, we had clothes on our back. There it was. So so I think you'll be a good father. And I think you'll be a good father. And because of the hard, I'm so glad you're having a child now and not 15 years ago.
Well, it's funny you say that, because, me and my partner often reflect on how, everything is for the best, and God, he knows better, because, even though we might have wanted a child earlier, that would have been horrible, that would have been a disaster. And, we often reflect and feel grateful that, it has happened. It's like I was saying, I feel like the luckiest person alive. It feels so perfect. It feels like a story, with a happy ending, and it was all written and planned, and
I sound like a Calvinist. Well, Tim, I should let you go and spend a little bit of time with my family. But
cool.
But thank you so much for being persistent and for sharing your story. And if you want to talk again, there'll be more bumps in the road. There always are. But I'm glad that you shared this with me, and I'll send it to you. And you tell Ian, you tell Ian to he should really release that talk, and then maybe the two of these talks will be on my channel. And I think people will be inspired and encouraged by your story. Because you are someone for whom your hard work has paid off. And no, it's not easy. You got to get up every day and you got to go to work. And caulking isn't easy work. It's you're on your hands and your knees, and you're not getting any younger. And now you're going to have a kid, so all the financial pressure is going to be greater. But yours is still a beautiful story.
I just wanted to thank you and your guests, because that it really does help when I'm having a bad day, and I can listen to somebody else's story and learn from that story, and so I just wanted to thank them for giving me that, and and you as well. So
I too feel mightily blessed, and this crazy thing that is my YouTube channel, I'm so blessed by it. And again, I was saying this in the video I just released the other day. I think it's just an amazing thing that I can just kind of have a open invitation for random people out there to come on and share their story. And what a beautiful, what a beautiful list of stories it is. And so I'm just indebted to all of you for being willing to share yourselves in this really public way.
Yeah, it's amazing, really. I was speaking to my friend, and he was talking about how what you're doing is just really of the people, and there's something really special about that. And thanks. That's awesome.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, you have a wonderful Sunday.
All right, you too.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care, Tim.
Oh, you have a good Saturday. So.
I will. So long.
See ya.
Bye-bye.